Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Behind the Lava podcast. I'm Spencer Harman. I'll be hosting this episode. We're going to continue where we left off with last week. But first, we're going to pass it to a guest that we have. We've got Sualevai Thompson here with us. Sualevai, would you like to introduce yourself? Let us know who you are.
Yep. Thanks, Spencer, for the opportunity. Yep. I'm Fesauai Thompson from the island of Onu. Graduated from Atimua. Currently, I'm working at a service department for a Chevrolet dealership. That's what I do now. So I was asked by Michael Tan to be a part of this prestigious group to discuss topics that seldom Polynesian or Samoans talks about. And I was honored to be considered by Mr. Tan. And I know I'm very blessed and grateful to join the group.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to remind everybody, we've got Prez, Michael, we've got Mr. T joining us again. We've also got Johnny and Ati as well. And so thanks everybody for joining us. We wanted to continue where we left off with last week. We were talking about gun control and other things that basically are spiraling out of the discussion because of the Uvalde shooting in Texas. And so we wanted to continue to speak on that because obviously it's hard to collect our thoughts in one small segment. And so let's see, Michael, did you want to point us in a specific direction for carrying on with this discussion?
Let's go ahead and take it, Johnny.
Yeah, so I remember last time we were talking about Uvalde with just a recap with the shooting that happened and our thoughts. I know a lot of us were pro Second Amendment, and I know a lot of us are prior military, so we have experience in handling specific firearms and weapon systems. But now, as we get into the deeper topic, which is the debate currently going on right now with more stringent gun control, removal of assault style, which is the quote that they want to classify these weapons that are sold in the civilian sector, and they want to remove it from the hands of everyday citizens, military style, assault style weapons. For me, my thoughts on that. It's just, you're just tying hands. I know we spoke last week about how if a criminal wants to have a firearm, these laws, these gun-free zones, these stipulations ain't going to stop them. They're going to figure out a way to get it regardless. The only people that are affected by these laws are the people who actually follow them, people who want to uphold the law, who want to maintain a positive standing in the current status quo. But I feel like they keep trying to find different ways to pander to the public. And they use tragedies like these to push forward an agenda. And I mean, me personally, I'm not for it. I don't think that you should use a tragedy like this to say that look at it. The weapon caused this shooting, like with the whole with the parents, the families of the last shooting. I forgot the name. Where they sued and won. Like I don't know. That's like suing a car manufacturer for a DUI killing somebody. The car didn't do it. It was the operator, the driver. Same thing with these weapons. It's a tool, and it was used to create this tragedy. So, I mean, that's my stance. I've always been solid on that. I'm pro Second Amendment, but I mean, that's just my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very much, I know I made this clear last time. I'm very much of the same mind. You touched on a rhetoric that's going around a lot. A statement was made, and it gets made every time tragedies like this occur, where they say we need to be able to sue the gun manufacturer because people are misusing their products, or they're saying they're creating dangerous products and it's not a misuse because that's what they were made for. I'm like, that's obviously a misuse because it wasn't made to go around killing willy-nilly whoever you want. Made for self-defense. There are legal ways to use these items. Also, it's a falsehood to say that it was specifically a statement made by the president last week saying that the gun manufacturers enjoy a level of, I'm mixing up my words right now, but basically saying like they're a unique industry that can't be sued for the harm their products cause. Absolutely untrue. The same goes for large parts of big pharma. People are not able to lobby lawsuits against large pharmaceutical companies who knowingly push out products that are harmful to people and marketing them initially as non-harmful. People don't do that to, you mentioned vehicles. Vehicles are actually a really good example because that gets brought up a lot. They say, oh, we should regulate guns like we regulate cars. You need a license to drive a car, therefore you should have a license to use a firearm. Difference is that a car is not a constitutionally guaranteed right. But I think what's more telling of that comparison is that cars kill more people every year than firearms. And there are way more firearms out there than cars. But the difference is, despite having to pass government regulated training in order to even operate those, and even with cars being made for the intent of having a purpose other than killing, as gun critics say, they still take more lives every year than firearms in America. So it's just, well, it's the sad thing is with a lot of these tragedies is people are just chomping at the bit, almost waiting for these to happen so that they can immediately politicize it. I understand there's a point of you want to see action because it's, of course, you're going to be emotionally invested. This is a terrible thing that happened. We want to prevent it from happening again. So there's this drive to hurry up and do something immediately. Problem is, and as we've seen in the military, the hasty decision is not always the best one. There are times where you have to make hasty decisions because the situation calls for it. But this is not one of those times. You have to take your time to sort out all of the factors to make sure that whatever direction we move in is the correct one. And just saying, hurry up and ban guns before there's another shooting, you need to consider, is this really the factor that's going to prevent future shootings and future tragedies? And from our stance, me and Johnny at least, would say no.
Yeah, I was just interested in looking at one of the objectives on what could be done more. And I was, I guess, pretty happy that there was a bipartisan agreement within Congress that was passed recently. And I think that we all seen it. It was echoed by Matthew McConaughey just recently on the news, as far as more expansion for the local levels to have funding, especially for schools to expand, especially on mental health. Also for the local governments to have more funding as far as the police, so to say. So, and I guess that's one of the things that really need to happen more often is having a more bipartisan approach to issues like this instead of being divisive in the nation. And I kind of agree, but we have to wait until something happens in order for the public, our representatives, to do something instead of being proactive. But I'm pretty happy, like there was a bipartisan agreement. That's one of the big things that needs to happen within that, from big government, especially gun laws within the United States.
I have a question for Fesauai, and it's kind of off topic since Spencer mentioned car. I know, Fesauai, you work in a car dealership company, and I'm just wondering if people have come try and sue you or your company for the incidents that's happened with the cars that they buy from you guys.
Okay. Well, yeah, it has happened. And I had one case, actually, that happened to me when I was working for Volvo dealership. It was in regards to a repair that was done without the customer's consent, according to the customer. However, we always use a quote that usually reminds us that documentation beats conversation 100% of the time. Okay, so my thing is me as a service advisor, I always make sure to document the conversation I have with the customer. So I won the case. It's pretty much a straightforward case. Customer says this, and I said, here's my documentation, here's the paperwork. So yeah, I've experienced that.
Thank you. And T, do you have any comments on this question?
Man, so I like how, well, first of all, I hate this circle that we keep going in every time something happens, this discussion in politics and all that. And then celebrities, politicians, people on social media echoing the same thing. Ban weapons now, something's got to be done. And we just look at the weapons, but nobody's looking within their own communities, especially at those people with broken homes, where they're coming from, how to watch over, because it starts somewhere. There's a seed that takes people to a dark place and it grows over time, and then these things happen. And we're not looking on the inside. A lot of people aren't looking on the inside. We're just blaming the easiest thing that there is to blame, which is the tool that's being used to kill. And a lot of times I think everybody has to look in their own community. I mean, yeah, I love basketball. I love sports, and I like coaching and helping them develop a work ethic. But at the same time, I'm also watching how they are as human beings, trying to stop them from growing into assholes because we all dealt with bullies before, some way, shape, or form. And we also, for some reason, that also stopped being part of the topic is bullying, which was contributed to whether it's a school shooter or just some active shooter somewhere. It dealt with some sort of bullying and all that. I think we need to go deeper and continue to try to watch out for one another instead of just yelling at stop. I mean, because you guys spoke on the evil intent last time, and that's always going to be there. But like, how do we prevent that from ever being planted in somebody's mind and then growing and then turning into something ugly and tragic?
Let me hop back in just to expand a little bit. So Matthew McConaughey, he is from Uvalde, and I guess this was kind of different for him. I mean, I'm not speaking on his behalf, but I was just going in lines with, because I followed his career a little bit, and he's always been an activist for more gun control. And this hit home for him because it happened right in his backyard. He's from Milwaukee, and so he was kind of more being a voice for the general public, i.e. us for that matter, just try to get the word out there. But one of the things that he touched upon was, and which he was happy about, was the fact that one of the bipartisan things that was passed was raising the age limit from 18 to 21 for access, because for the last decade or so, every incident that has happened was somebody from age 18 to 20 or 21 from that matter that had access to weapons or firearms, committed these heinous acts. And that was one of the good things, was for that age limit to be raised. My question to you guys is, who should be responsible for paying? Is it the gun manufacturers, the insurance companies, the school, the state government, or federal government? And that's kind of the question that's always out there. And, I wanted to pose to you guys, see what you guys think about it. Who should pay? Who should come out and pay ultimately for the price that these kids, these victims, that's always happening in situations like this?
I like that, Ati, with the who's supposed to pay. The problem I have with that is we don't put a price on human lives. It's hard to put a price on human lives because, and this is by my understanding, so you put a price on something and then you start looking for who to point the finger at. And then you start, like how insurance companies work, when you can pay for their service just to have that little thing in your back pocket making you feel good, just backing you up. But as soon as something happens, it's like pulling teeth to get the insurance to pay out, because they're going to find an excuse why they shouldn't have to pay out. And when it comes to something like this, and we decide that if there's ever a school shooting, we should make this or this or this or this or that, this party involved has to be responsible. Now you're immediately casting blame, and it's hard because ultimately the one to blame is the shooter, the person who decided to go out and commit this heinous violent act. The problem is you always come out wanting, because the shooter usually has nothing left. You can attack the assets, you can attack the families, the parents, but most of the time there's nothing. So you can't really put a price, because then if we decide who's going to pay, i.e. it's going to be the school, the town, the city, the county, the federal government, or the gun manufacturers, or the bootmaker for the boots that the kid was wearing, the tactical gear, the Kevlar, are they going to pay? And then once we decide who's at fault, now we got to decide how much they have to pay. Is what, $400,000 a life? Maybe $500,000 a life? What about the guy that cut a deal for $6 million for suing police departments for loss of life? You can't really put a number on that. And so it's not something for, I don't know. I can't cast blame on who's going to pay.
Well, I think according to the military standard, about $400,000 is the cost of a life, because I think that's the base life insurance they give us. but no, you're right.
That's got stipulations too.
Yeah. I'm like, I wouldn't be collecting as my family, so I'm like, they can deal with that when I'm gone. I don't know. I just signed the paper, it looked like I'd be gone. But no, that is a good question. Who pays? It's like, on what level are we talking about? Are we talking about who pays for the medical care? Who pays for the footing the bill of the first responders? Who pays punishment-wise? Well, obviously, punishment-wise for me, it's like you've got to hold people accountable for their actions. I'm wary about pointing fingers, because we could say, oh, let's blame society for doing this, and it will blame the community for doing that. And I have no doubt that there are outside factors that build us up into taking certain actions, but ultimately those factors are innumerable. At the end of the day, it boils down to who did carry the action out. We've got to hold the shooter accountable for this action, and he's already been taken out. So as far as reconciliation for the family, I know the families that they've had their children taken from them. I just feel like that's the most tragic part of this, is that they now have holes in their hearts that can never be filled, and conflating the blame and saying it was this political party's fault or this organized group's fault for creating these situations. You can point their blame in so many ways, but I don't know if that hole can ever be filled. But I think that's also the danger of politicizing these things, is we start pushing ourselves in a direction where we start demonizing people who disagree with us. Start saying, if you don't agree with me, it's because you like dead children. It's like, that's a horrible thing to say. And I understand that people are very emotional in these times. How can you not be? You just lost loved ones, or you knew people just lost loved ones, or we're being forced to look at ourselves and think, what if that was me? What if that was my family? So the emotional thing is very understandable, but that's what makes it more difficult to try to take a step back and make sure that we're making the correct decisions in all of this. So I'd like to even tie that to, you brought up Matthew McConaughey. I know I said earlier that I don't like how people are just chomping at the bit, waiting for something to happen so they can politicize something. I don't accuse Matthew McConaughey of that. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him, but he always just seemed like a very sincere person. He didn't seem like your typical rich guy celebrity that's like, oh, I'm famous, listen to me. He never really has that aura in like interviews he's done. He's been very bipartisan and who he even reaches out to for an audience and whatnot. But while I think he comes from a legit place, that in his heart, this is how he feels, this is the direction we got to address this, I disagree with his stance on some of these steps, like the raising of the age to purchase certain firearms from 18 to 21, I think is a bad direction to go, because the reason that 18-year-olds were able to purchase firearms in the first place is because that's when they're stepping into adulthood. And we now have to consider who has now lost options to defend themselves from legitimate dangers that are still out there. And this school shooting is a good example of a tragedy we could have prevented had he not been able to purchase firearms at that age. But now, what about young single mothers who are out there, 18 years old, that have an abusive partner, that they file a restraining order from them? But a restraining order is just a document. You still have to wait to call the police to respond. And if this is a person that's giving you and your child threats, and you're just a 18-year-old that has no fighting advantage against an abusive partner, you create a situation where the typical phrase is, when seconds matter, police are minutes away. And the reason for those laws existing is so someone in these harsh circumstances are able to defend themselves while first responders are on the way. That's why taking Mr. McConaughey's approach, you may do more harm than good, because yes, you prevent one tragedy, but how many tragedies every year do you not hear about because it's not reported on the news that were prevented because of the laws that we had in place before? But like I said, I don't demonize people who disagree with me. If people feel that's the right way to go, I'll just disagree. But I mean, you're welcome to your 2 cents as well.
Okay, if you guys don't mind, I want to jump in. I, for one, am not a fan of guns. I don't even like it at all. But however, one opinion doesn't make a whole community. That's my thing. So I feel like with this gun topic, I always put together with drugs, same thing over and over and over. It's a broken record topic. But things happen. I mean, if we think about it, let's take a look at New Zealand and Australia. Something happened, boom. The government came in as one, not political sides, not having to talk like, hey, I got an agenda, but here's my little something for you guys to push. No, they came in and said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. But as a whole, this is what we're going to do. I think America should, there's just some things in life, I think America should just put political aside, politics, and do what's best for everybody. It's the same thing, because okay, granted, whoever is using the gun is the sole responsible person for whatever happens to it. I always see these shirts people wearing, guns don't kill people. People kill people. That is true. It's a straight up fact. Whoever buys the gun, to me, has to be mentally sharp to own the gun. It's the same thing with drugs. Drugs is around. But if you're mentally sharp, you're not going to touch it. It's the same thing with owning a gun, with buying a gun. That's, to me, should be at least try to put it into perspective. But then again, when money's involved behind all this stuff, trust me, none of this will come to fruition. No matter how many times we talk about it, no matter how many events happen and issues come forward, this is not a new thing. Same thing happened in Colorado, Florida. It's the same thing. We've heard about these when we were little kids. Now we're grown adults. It's still the same topic. People are fighting for it. But yet, those pencil pushers in DC, they don't even do nothing about it. Why? Because it doesn't benefit them. What happened to being a decent human being? That's my thing. It's the same thing with drugs to me. And then with the insurance thing, they're the biggest scammers. I deal with them daily at my work. People bring the cars in. They go, oh, I have insurance. I say, okay, what are your insurance say? Do they cover this and this? I don't know. I say, but then why did you sign it? Well, it's my safety net. Yes, it's your safety net. But did you read the clause? Because there's always those fine print. Yet nobody reads it. All they want to hear, oh, how much am I paying a month? Oh, $100. Oh, that's cheap. State Farm over there and say, hey, I'll give you 150, but Allstate over there, hey, you're in good hands, $100. But are you really in good hands? I don't know. We'll see when shit hits the fan. And I deal with them. I always ask them, so do you guys cover this? Oh, we don't cover electrical problem, only mechanical problem. So in my head, I'm like, what, did the customer know? Yeah, we told them, they signed the paper. Funny. Okay. I hung up the phone, called the customer. Hey, did you know that electrical problems are not covered under your insurance? No, I didn't know that. They never tell me. Okay. Yeah, end of the conversation. What they're going to say? Well, too bad. It's the thing, because at the end of the day, whoever's benefit from it, they're the one that's making the money, not whoever. So that's my thing about it. I don't mind the guns. I'm not a fan of it, but if you're gonna use it, be wise. Please, just use it smart. Because most of these people that start shooting up the schools and all this stuff, they're not very mentally sharp people. Think about it. Even this kid from Texas, he's a loner. No, these are some of the things that people that sell guns to the people have to look into it, the background. But then some people don't look into the background and the mental health of a person. They just want the money. At the end of the day, hey, I'll sell you the gun. I got my money. Whatever you do with it, that's on you. That's not on me. But that's just my little take on it.
Thank you for sharing that. Like, I think you really hit the nail on the head. You and T touched on this too, where you said whatever happened to being a decent human being. That's got to be at the heart of it. And T was talking about all these factors that people grow up with that contribute to pushing somebody to doing these like horrible things like this. I just wanted to even throw that back to this podcast specifically, because before I even joined in and started participating in this, I really appreciated the topics that you guys were talking about, because the ones that T mentioned, like things like people dealing with suicide or suicidal thoughts, people dealing with depression, people dealing with bullying, etc. These are topics that you guys had laid out and discussed. And I think it's one of those things where we may not have access to, like, not everybody has access to proper therapy or someone who can help talk them through difficult things. So I think the fact that Prez created this podcast to basically lay out these topics, and just you guys kind of shared, hey, I went through this, and you discussed it, you discussed the things that helped you get through it, or maybe we're going through it now, trying to still get through it. I think that discussion alone and opening it up is a healthy way to do it. I'm not saying it's this all-encompassing thing, but I mean, people being able to open up about difficulties in their lives and outside factors that you may have grown up with or deal with today. I think it's important to just open up those topics of discussion before they fester up and turn into something terrible.
Yes, let's just be decent human beings. You don't have to like the opinion of others, but you can respect them the same way you would want yourself to be respected. And I know here in the United States, we hear about multiple shootings every single day. Let's not become numb to the fact that there are shootings and we start to ignore it like it's a daily thing. Until it happens to you, then you would start to feel all the emotions that the victims and the families feel. But it's all about empathy. And moving on to the next question, I know the law enforcement has been feeling the heat of this topic, especially on gun violence. Do you guys feel that law enforcement or first responders are at any fault how they respond to these shootings?
Well, I'm a real quick on this one. So I don't know if you guys remember, but back in '99, I actually looked this up. The Columbine shooting was to me, that was the first major shooting that I was aware of. And it was the same thing. It was like 12 students and 2 teachers. And it was a horrible tragedy. But at that same time, the law enforcement was criticized for their response. They were mustered outside and they were hesitant or reticent to go inside the building to assault. The same thing happened with the Florida and now here with Uvalde. I know that Uvalde shooting, the law enforcement's got taken a big hit because it took an off-duty Border Patrol agent to press the room. And then there was another case recently that I'd seen where I think it was North Carolina or whatever, where they were checking up on a warrant and the guy decided to jump a fence and swim out into the middle of the lake, realized that he wasn't a very good swimmer and drowned. And the police stood there. And then law enforcement took a lot of backlash from that one because they said like somebody should have went in there. But it's the liability thing. Or if not seeing any good word because it makes it sound like an insurance thing. What it is just if you're not an accomplished swimmer or if you're not geared to extricate that person out of the water safely with the proper equipment, you could also die in that. It's like when fireman does it, everybody loves a hero, but when the guy goes in there trying to save the person in trouble and dies doing it, then it becomes 2 people that died or a double tragedy or even 3 times. So I know a lot of us in the military, we're familiar with SOPs and how we run things. And so it's kind of like, do we blame the officers for not putting themselves in harm's way? And I say this loosely because a lot of people believe that with the officers' creed, they're supposed to put themselves in harm's way to protect and defend. But at the same time, if their SOPs states that they don't rush into a situation where they have no understanding or with no protection, no backup or anything like that, then do we blame the department? And me, frankly, I'm pro-police, but I'm pro-good police. There are bad apples out there, and there are a lot of instances with bad policing. But overall, like I'd say 90% of the police force is just solid, outstanding gentlemen, men and women. But in this situation, I don't think, and even then what happened with Columbine and with what happened with those 2 officers that watched that suspect drown because they couldn't go out there and they told him not to go out there. There's a whole body cam footage and everything. And it's just, they become a liability. And so I know they took a lot of heat for it, but I'm kind of on the side of the law enforcement to where usually a lot of times they're waiting for seniority or senior leadership to tell them what to do in situations like this. And I don't know all the facts. I don't know if they were told not to go in there, but at the same time, I'm not going to put blame on law enforcement for not immediately kicking down doors, jumping in and just blasting. That's just me though.
It's very sad because for some reason, America loves this blaming game. They try to find who to blame. But then again, those people, like the first responders, the police officers and stuff, those, at the end of the day, they're humans. It's the same thing as me. No matter what title or what job you do, you're a human being first. You're a person first. The same thing as being a father, whoever have kids. You were once a kid first before you became a father. It's the same concept with out in the world. So that's why when there was a shooting, I read upon it when I was back in Samoa. It's the Sualevai brothers. They were shot in Compton. I'm not really sure if you guys are familiar with the story. It was right around when Rodney King became popular too around that time, like back in 91.
91, yep.
Yeah. So these brothers, Bovi and Italia, they were shot 20 times. Question is, why? Why were they shot 20 times? Because if you didn't really think about it, it's a double-edged sword for first responders because of who they are. Who's the one holding the gun, or who's the police officer, who's the first responder? Because trust me, we can all be policemen, all of us. Think about it. But you're gonna bring your own personal agenda when you go out too. I'm telling you, because I've had some customers who are police officers to come and then they say, hey, I don't even like certain races. So when I go out to a call and then if it's a black person, I really don't give a shit. And this is him just speaking on stuff like this over at our dealership. And I'm in my head, I'm like, then why would you become a police officer? You're not the right person for it. But then again, you can pass all the training in the world. But if you're not a good person, you're just not going to do the job the way it's supposed to be done, because common sense comes first than anything else. Trust me. No matter what training you do, the moment you're out in the field, you do your own thing. And then all of a sudden you thought about training once, you make a mistake. Cops are good. And just like what Johnny said, there's good cops and then there's bad apples. Same thing. But how do we weed them out? I don't know. We can't. We just gotta have to figure a way out for that.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for the contributions. Like we established the last time, this tragedy brings up a lot of discussion points, and we obviously aren't able to cover them all in our time frame. So we're going to end it there, and we're going to pick it up where we left off in the next episode. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye.